Derek is 33. He works as a distribution center supervisor in Memphis and brings home about $3,400 a month after taxes. He's married, has 2 kids, and his wife Tanya works part-time at a daycare 3 days a week. Together, they bring in just under $4,800 a month. On paper, that sounds survivable, until you write it down. Rent, $1,400. Groceries, $950. Car payment. Insurance. Electric bill. Gas. The kids need school supplies. Tanya's phone screen cracked last week. Derek's been putting off new work boots for 2 months. Every dollar already has a destination before it even arrives. And by the middle of the month, most of it is gone. Now here's the part most people get wrong. When someone like Derek stays stuck, people assume it's because he's careless, lazy, bad with money. He's not. He doesn't gamble. He doesn't blow money on nonsense. He sits at the kitchen table on Friday nights and stretches every dollar as far as it can go. And every month, he ends up in the same place. If that sounds familiar, you're not imagining it. Because for millions of people, the problem isn't just low income. It's what financial stress does to the way you think. That's the real trap. Warren Buffett understood this better than most people realize. He knew that staying broke isn't always about intelligence, discipline, or effort. Sometimes it's about the mental patterns that financial pressure creates, patterns that quietly keep people in survival mode year after year. And until those patterns change, the cycle repeats. Same paycheck, same bills, same stress, same zero at the end of the month. So this video is not just about money. It's about the psychology of being stuck, why the trap feels impossible to escape, and the simple Buffett principles that can help you start breaking it even if you don't make much right now. Because the low-income trap isn't just about what you earn. It's about what being broke trains your brain to do. There's a reason being broke feels exhausting, and it has nothing to do with you being stupid. Researchers at Harvard and Princeton studied what happens to the mind when money is tight. They found that when low-income participants were asked to think about a large unexpected expense, something like an urgent car repair or a medical bill, they couldn't easily afford. Their cognitive performance dropped dramatically. Not because they suddenly became less capable, because financial pressure was consuming mental bandwidth. In practical terms, it was like losing the mental sharpness you'd expect from missing an entire night of sleep. That's what scarcity does. When money is tight, your brain gets pulled into constant emergency management. What's due next? Can the payment wait? Do we buy groceries now or after Friday? Can we survive one more week before fixing the car? What happens if one more thing goes wrong? Even when you're not actively budgeting, part of your mind is still running those calculations in the background. And when your brain is overloaded like that, long-term thinking starts to disappear. You stop thinking about next year. Sometimes you stop thinking about next month. You start thinking about Friday, about the 15th, about keeping the lights on, about getting through the week. That is not a character flaw. That is what the brain does under constant pressure. And here's where the trap gets even stronger. When stress becomes your normal state, relief becomes incredibly valuable. A meal out after a crushing week, a quick purchase that makes you feel human again, the subscription you keep because everything else already feels like sacrifice, the little convenience that gives your brain 5 minutes of relief. Those decisions don't happen because you're irresponsible. They happen because you're tired. And that's why the low-income trap is so hard to escape. It's not just that there isn't much money left. It's that financial pressure trains your mind to prioritize relief over strategy. That's the trap. And Warren Buffett's insight cuts right into it. He said, "Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving." At first, that sounds simple, but for most struggling families, it feels backwards. Because when the bills are already crushing you, saving feels like a luxury, something you'll do later, when things calm down, when you finally get ahead. But later never comes. Because if saving is always last, it almost never happens. That's why Buffett understood something deeper than most people do. The problem is not only how much money comes in, the problem is the order of operations. And changing that order is where escape begins. So, what does that actually look like for someone like Derek working with $4,800 a month, a family of 4, and almost no margin for error? Buffett's first principle is the most important. Pay yourself first. Not with some giant amount, not with some unrealistic money guru fantasy, just enough to break the pattern. Because most people do this in reverse. They pay rent, pay the car, pay the phone bill, buy the groceries, handle whatever surprise came up this week. And then they hope something is left. Usually nothing is. So Buffett's rule is simple. Save first, even if it's small. That means setting up an automatic transfer the same day the paycheck hits. $10, $15, $25. Whatever amount doesn't break you. The power is not in the size. The power is in the sequence. The moment saving happens before spending, the cycle starts to change. Because now progress is no longer depending on motivation. It's happening automatically. Derek set up a $25 weekly transfer on a Tuesday night. It took 4 minutes. He barely thinks about it now. It doesn't transform his life overnight. But for the first time in years, money is moving somewhere other than bills. That matters. Because the goal at first is not wealth. The goal is proof. Proof that the pattern can change. Now, Buffett's second principle is just as important, especially for low-income earners. He's said for years, the most important investment you can make is in yourself. That doesn't mean going $40,000 into debt for a degree you may never use. For someone like Derek, it means something smaller and more practical. A free certification, a skill learned online, a conversation with a manager about what leads to promotion, a forklift certification, a CDL inventory software, logistics training, basic Excel skills. These are not glamorous moves. Nobody's posting them online for attention, but they increase earning power. And Buffett always cared about earning power, because if you can make yourself more valuable in the market, you give yourself breathing room. And breathing room changes everything. One new skill can be worth thousands more a year. That's not hype. That's leverage. So Derek starts a free logistics certification online, 20 minutes a night after the kids go to bed. Nothing dramatic, nothing exciting. But 6 months from now, that small move could matter more than 100 hours of financial stress. Then comes Buffett's third principle, and this one explains why so many people stay stuck without realizing it. He said, "The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken." That applies to bad habits, obviously. The forgotten subscription, the daily convenience spending, the "I'll start next month" that quietly resets every 30 days. The constant delay, the financial avoidance, the refusal to look. But this is where Buffett's wisdom gets powerful, because good habits work the same way. A $25 weekly transfer feels tiny. A 20-minute study session feels tiny. Packing lunch 3 days a week feels tiny. Reviewing your bank account every Friday feels tiny. But tiny habits compound. 52 weeks of $25 becomes $1,300. A free certification can become a better paying role. A few small systems can reduce chaos more than one big burst of motivation ever could. That's how the chains start working in your favor. Not all at once. Quietly, gradually. Then, all of a sudden, your life starts feeling different. And this is the part that actually starts to set people free. Not because the bills disappear, not because the paycheck suddenly doubles, but because once you understand the trap, you stop confusing it with your identity. You start noticing what's really happening. The impulse purchase after a stressful day isn't just about wanting the item. It's about wanting relief. Avoiding your banking app isn't laziness. It's anxiety. Saying, "I'll deal with it next month," isn't a plan. It's a loop. And once you can see the loop, you have a chance to interrupt it. That's the shift. Before, you were inside the pattern. Now, you can actually see it. That doesn't solve everything overnight, but it gives you something incredibly important: distance. And with distance comes choice. Derek is 5 months in now. Same city, same apartment, same job at the distribution center. But the $25 weekly transfer is still running. He's got a little over $500 saved in an account that didn't exist before. He's working through a free logistics certification at night. And he checks his account now on purpose. Not because the number is huge, but because looking doesn't scare him the way it used to. That may sound small to some people. It isn't. Because for someone trapped in financial survival mode, fear reduction is progress. Stability is progress. Control is progress. He's not rich. He's not debt-free. He's not magically transformed. But he is moving. And that feeling changes the way a person carries themselves. Take Nicole. She's 39, lives in Columbus, and works in hospital administration. 3 years ago, she was stretched thin every month. No savings, no system, no real plan. She started with one small automatic transfer and used her lunch breaks to study for a medical billing certification on her phone. She finished in 4 months. That certification helped her move into a role paying $8,000 more a year. Today, she has roughly $4,000 saved. More importantly, she no longer thinks about money the same way. She's not just surviving her week anymore. She's building inside it. That's what changes first. Not always your income, your relationship to money. And once that changes, your decisions start changing with it. A lot of people don't like admitting that the low-income trap is real, but it is. And for millions of families, it's more real right now than ever. This is not just about low pay. It's not just about inflation. It's not just about bad luck. It's about what constant financial pressure does to the human mind. It narrows your focus. It drains your energy. It rewards short-term relief. And it makes long-term progress feel almost impossible. That's why so many good, hard-working people stay stuck. Not because they're broken, because the system of survival trains them to think like they're in permanent emergency mode. Warren Buffett understood that a long time ago. That's why his advice was never just about money. It was about sequence, habits, behavior, compounding, and making small decisions that keep working after motivation disappears. So, if you want to escape the low-income trap, don't wait for a perfect moment. Start with one small interruption. Set up the automatic transfer. $10 a week, $25 if you can handle it. Learn one skill that increases your value. Spend 20 minutes a day on it. Not someday, this week. And most importantly, stop believing that being stuck means you're failing. Sometimes being stuck is just what happens when financial pressure has been making your decisions for you. But the moment you interrupt that pattern, even in a small way, the escape begins. Because the trap is not just what you earn. The trap is what being broke teaches you to think. And once you see that clearly, you can finally start building your way out.